We expected it to go through uncontested, largely by the Conservatives, as it did last night. What particular rounds, how many more rounds does she have to go through now? So you continue the boxing analogy.
Well, they're planning a full two days of on the floor of the House legislation being looked at. Then it'll go to the Lords. The Lords will be a big problem, but it'll be a fight which I think the government wants to have. If you're trying to fight the Lords in any battle with MPs against the Lords, you're always going to win because they have no real legitimacy there. It was interesting, I think, that Caroline Noakes, who was caught, said she has absolute horror about this bill, and Chris Skidmore, who said it broke international law. Both those two did not vote against. They abstained. Around 40 MPs abstained. Some of them would have permission. This is Tory MPs abstained. Some of them would have permission. It'd be interesting to find out if any others had issues. A big thing to watch out for is whether rebels on the right will attach an amendment to this to try and get Britain to pull out of the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights. And that might need to go through against that with support from the Labour MPs, which could be a problem for the government.
They wouldn't get that through, Chris, would they?
They wouldn't get it through, Andrew, because Labour would vote with the government. But it's very embarrassing for Sunak because it'd have to go through with Labour MP support. It'd make Sunak himself look somewhat out of touch with what many want, because the big concern here is how can this actually work? Because the ECHR, the European Court of Human Rights, may well step in. The government is ready for that fight. They know this bill will push the boundaries of what's allowed under ECHR, but they think it's a battle worth fighting. Don't forget, Sunak has not said when he wants to stop the boats by, merely that he will do. So that idea in his 5 pledges back in January isn't quite clear when it must be delivered.
Now, David Davis told us on this programme, he reminded us, Chris, how he and Jack Straw in 2018, the former Labour Home Secretary, two senior Tory, senior Labour, combined to repel the European Court, trying to impose prisoners having votes. And it was a massive vote in the Commons. They saw off the European Court. And the government's argument, again, Chris, I think, is they can do this again, whatever the judges say about the Stop the Boats bill.
The problem there, Andrew, that took 12 years, OK? That took 12 years for that fight to finally, to the MP's Parliament to marshal its efforts to get around it. You and I will be retired from GBNews in 12 years' time, Andrew. Bev will still be going. Bev will carry on forever, but me and Andrew will be long gone. So I think it's an absolute urgency. It must happen for get the electoral benefit. Don't forget, I expect later this, I have no idea what will happen, but I'm sure there'll be an email going out from CCHQ today saying how Labour last night voted against immigration controls. This is the one area, I think, where I think the Tories are quite strong at the moment in politics.
That phrase, to get the electoral benefit, Christopher, that is going to be a phrase we're going to be using more and more and more in the next 18 months. How important is it that the Conservatives can win this particular policy, this area? It is important to people on the streets when we talk about what we would like to see our government do. Yes, they want to improve the cost of living, and yes, we need to look at inflation and interest rates and all of that, and safety and all of the things. NHS, education, stop me when I've got to the end of the list. But people do feel strongly about immigration, and particularly illegal immigration.
Well, that's totally right. It polls very highly all the time. It annoys people. They feel that many who voted for Brexit felt that taking back control of the borders was what was on the tin when they bought the baked beans in the supermarket. That's what they thought they were getting. And why hasn't it happened yet? That's the concern for people. And it is understood, I think, by Sunak. What Labour do is interesting. I mean, I heard Lord Blunkett, the former Home Secretary, at the weekend saying he thinks Labour should not oppose this. Let it go through and see if it works. Because if it works, it subneuters the problem for the next election.
Of course. At the moment, Chris, the Prime Minister, I'd have thought he would have wanted to be in the Commons last night, marshalling his troops, voting with the troops, while Keir Starmer's marshalling his troops to vote against it. But he's on the international stage. He's talking with the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of Australia, about this big deal for Britain to be involved in the supply of these nuclear energy submarines. Very important about restating our relationship with the States and Australia, and also to be a bulwark against Chinese influence.
Very, very important. It's a deal to build, a dozen or so subs up in Barrow. There's jobs in Barrow and in Derby where the engines are made. Then we transfer some of the technology down to Australia. They build them in South Australia. The same submarines, who have a fleet of the same submarines travelling the world. The Australian subs will have no nuclear weapons on. the ones that they'll be nuclear powered, because the problem is you've got to be at sea for a long time. The threat from China is so great there. I think there's already a reaction taking place on the world stage with President Xi from China meeting with President Putin in Russia next week. I mean, we are seeing a lot of big chess pieces moving around the globe at the moment, but as really the UK, Australia, and Great Britain and USA, forgive me, respond to China's behaviour over the past 10 years. There's a kind of reaction, and then a reaction to that reaction happening at the moment. It's a bit scary, but I think we need to know that this is done for our best interests, I think.
Yeah. I'm looking at your newspaper online, the Daily Telegraph. Gary Lineker, this is confirmed, hasn't it, that he's just bigger than the BBC?
It looks that way, doesn't it? I mean, in a sense that the way it played out, he hasn't really had to apologise. Tim Davies, the Director General, has apologised. It hasn't really worked out for the BBC. It's another time when they've been found quite wanting. Where this goes long term, there's a big concern now that these new rules on social media engagement won't be ready for a few months. Will other presenters see this as an opportunity to use the Lineker clause to pile in on government issues? I mean, the budget tomorrow could be a moment when you have other presenters saying, well, I'll have my say now, and where does that leave impartiality? I think the board is supporting Tim Davie for now. The government is trying to stay out of it, but there's definitely a worry about where it leaves the BBC over the medium term.
Just briefly, Chris, we had Jacob Rees-Mogg here yesterday saying it's the end now. They've got to be defunded, lose the licence because all pretension at impartiality is gone. How many Tory MPs are you talking to at Westminster are saying much the same?
I mean, dozens say that, and we know they believe that. The question is, what can you replace it with? Would it be a Netflix-style subscription model? How would that work? Would you have? Well, maybe why not? I mean, but would it work? There is Nadine Dorries had a review of this. We're going to see something in medium term on what she thinks may work. But I think the problem is if you get rid of impartiality, it's hard to justify the licence fee.